All right. Well, with that, we will get started. My name is Charlie Doobie. I'm the head of regenerative partnerships at Agrology. Welcome, everyone, to another one of our webinars. We've been holding these webinars for, I think, almost 2 years now, bringing in experts in the field to help illuminate different parts of regenerative viticulture, regenerative agriculture, soil science, carbon science, quite a few things. So we're really excited about this one. This webinar is titled The Secrets of Success, Trialing Regenerative Practices and Biologic Applications, and we have the team from Vino Farms. So I will hand it over to Jay to introduce himself, and then we'll do some quick housekeeping, and then we will jump in with Mike and Daniel.
Sounds great. So I'm Jay. I work with Charlie. We're sort of co-conspirators here at Agrology. Before working in Agrology, I worked in a lot of different technology companies, and then before that, I was working on a farm. So have a background in organic/regenerative integrated vegetable, beef, and dairy production on the East Coast. And yeah, jumping into Agrology almost 2 years, year and a half ago, been learning a lot about viticulture and just learning a lot with growers like Mike and Daniel. So yeah, excited for this conversation today.
Awesome. So some just quick housekeeping. Please keep yourself on mute. Add any questions or comments you have into the chat. We will be doing like a pretty extended question and answer period at the end of the session. We will be recording the session, and then we will also be sending out that recording as well as the slide deck in a follow-up email tomorrow. So no need to be, taking copious notes. You'll have a recording. And yeah, last note is that we take our customer data privacy very seriously. And so all of the data that we'll be sharing from Vino today has been approved. And that's just how we operate, right? So we never share our customer data unless we have approval. With that, I will stop sharing my screen. And Mike and Daniel, can you give yourselves a quick intro so we know who we're talking to?
Certainly. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. My name is Michael Harder. I am the area manager for Vino Farms in the Lodi division. Currently running about 4,500 acres of wine grapes and about 200 acres of pistachios.
Awesome. Daniel, you want to give yourself a quick intro?
Yeah, hi, I'm Daniel. I'm the viticulturist for Vino Farms for Lodi. I help manage all of our certifications to our fertilizer, pesticide, irrigations type of stuff.
Awesome. Well, we're really appreciative of having you guys coming on today and sharing some of it. It's been a really a really fun partnership that we have with Vino, and we have some really interesting data to share today. But before we jump into that, my first question to you guys was, can you just give us a little background on Vino Farms? What's the history of the company? And where'd you guys start and kind of where are you headed as a company?
Sure, I'll take that, Charlie. So Vino Farms is a family-owned vineyard management business. Third generation is leading the charge right now as we speak. We've been in operation since the early 1970s, so almost a half of a century, more than half a century. We have three real basic growing regions that we operate out of. Obviously, Lodi is one of them. We have a huge North Coast presence, Sonoma Lake and Napa counties. And then we have our operations down on the Central Coast, which includes the Santa Maria and Paso Robles area, and just recently added some vineyards in the Lompoc area. Like I said, I would consider ourselves fairly large in that respect. We employ well over 300 full-time employees. We utilize 5 different farm labor contractors throughout the state that employ well over 2,000 farm labor contractor workers. We bring in a little over 200 H2A workers at the same time to augment with our domestic workforce. We are predominantly a conventionally practiced farming management unit. And as of about 5 years ago, the Lodi region started to transition into biodynamic and organic, and then just recently the organic side, or the regenerative side. I would like to preface, Charlie, thank you for referring to us as experts, but I will dumb that down a little bit. By no means do we want to give the illusion that we are experts on the regenerative side. We are in the process of learning this, like probably most everybody else that's attending this the seminar today. We recently certified some acres, and we're looking at doing some more. So that's a little history on Vino Farms.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that humility. I feel like that is it's so true of all regenerative practitioners, and I think that's what makes regenerative both such an interesting space, but also so challenging, is that, you know, every region needs its own sort of bespoke program. Really, every field and every ranch needs a bespoke program. So there's you know, we can become experts on sort of the overall principles of it, but in terms of how it's applied, we all need to be lifelong learners, right? And I really admire that kind of curiosity that you guys have, and that, like, you know, they call it the beginner's mind, right? Where you're so open and ready to learn. So that's awesome.
I agree, and I would add to that you know what I'm finding unique on the regenerative side is that it's so new that there's a lot of collaboration, right? There's not really a textbook, so to say. So we're leaning on you guys. We're leaning on other growers that are looking at moving towards this. So I'm excited that you know, it's not something that we hold tight to our chest and we're afraid to share information with. You know, we want to see this movement grow.
Awesome.
Well, Mike, I think, you know, your background on Vino is kind of part of what makes this conversation really interesting, right? Typically, a lot of the growers we work with are, you know, private label, smaller, you know, wineries and vineyards, who are selling direct to consumer, you know, and regenerative is really interesting because when you're a company like that, you can communicate that directly to consumers. You can maybe sort of extract that premium, you know, right out of the tasting room. And offer experiences on your vineyard, right? You guys are a little different. Your business is very different than that. So could you talk us through sort of like what brought you into regenerative? And I know that's really tied to what's happening in Lodi. And yeah, just sort of what this journey has looked like from a high level in your business and your business's culture.
Absolutely. You know, I think I could go about this in three different aspects. I'll start off with my own personal thoughts on this, and then kind of go to it as through a business aspect as well. This will be my 30th harvest with Vino Farms coming up 2025, pardon.
Congrats.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So, you know, I've seen the sustainability movements. I've seen the organic movements, and, you know, walking the fields over all these years, you know, I've always had this half-witted theory for myself, you know, as we've done these conventional practices, year in and year out, repeatedly, through cycles, you know, what's happening below the soil surface, right? Especially when you talk about directly underneath the vine. You know, I think everybody can appreciate the aesthetics of a nice clean vineyard, right? But when you look at that ground, and you look at that amount of acreage that has been routinely applied with pre-emergent weed sprays, you've got fertilizers from drip irrigation, all being concentrated in one area. You know, I've always had this theory in the back of my head. What's it look like down below, right? You know, the soil structure looks very beat up. There's no colloids in the soil structure. It's very flat. It's very, how do you want to say, sterile, right? So, you know, that was part of my own personal motivation to look into a different style of farming practice. I will say that on the business side, from the business perspective, we were approached in 2020 by a winemaker slash winery owner in the Healdsburg area who was looking to source an Italian varietal to replace a source that was coming out of production. And he reached out to the Vino Farms family members, and he'd heard through channels that we had this varietal, Vermentino, at one of our ranches, and he showed great interest in this. This gentleman started talking to us about possibly farming biodynamically and becoming biodynamically certified. That got the wheels rolling right there, 2020, right? So as we progressed with this relationship with this winery and this winemaker, through word of mouth, you know, we started to generate more and more interest from North Coast wineries coming over to Lodi, looking to source what they considered a more environmentally sound product, right? So what I would say is we've evolved from, you know, this biodynamic scene. And in 2021, we picked up a client's vineyard in Lodi that was certified organic. Okay. And big buyers on this one. You know, Bonterra was a big purchaser of this one, and several small other wineries. And it just seemed like there was more and more interest on the organic side and the biodynamic side than what we could get out of, you know, the conventional practice side. You know, the big players in the game, you know, they were struggling to see price increases. We were struggling to get those. And so really what it did is it pushed us in this direction, especially for Lodi. And if you guys, you know, if you've driven through the Lodi area, and I travel the state now with a new role, which I'll explain here in a little bit, but I would say Lodi, out of all the wine grape growing areas, is being greatly impacted by the current market that we are in. So, you know, we are motivated as a business to stay solvent. Obviously, it's a business that's been in play for over 50 years, and we had to adapt, right? If we're gonna stay in the business, we can't rely on, you know, the big players, the big wineries in the game, you know, to provide us with a substance that's going to keep us sustainable for the future. We had to look outside the box, right? And I remember a point where we got an email, Dan and I got an email from our one of our owners. He says, "Hey, my phone's going off the hook. We need to set up a meeting and talk about how we're going to expand our operations in terms of organic and biodynamic." Well, that was 2 years ago. And, you know, we came up with a great plan to start incorporating more vineyards and more blocks into this organic scene. And then about a year and a half ago, this gentleman in Healdsburg who introduced us to this biodynamic scene came to us, and I believe, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that he was on the Demeter board of certification. He was in the process of having a falling out, right? If for those that have been through the BD certification process, it's a little bit of a hassle. And he posed this idea of moving everything to this regenerative certified system. And that was new to us. We were like, wow, okay. You know, we hadn't heard anything about that. And probably 3 weeks, a month after he had brought that conversation up with us, Dan and I got a special invite from Bonterra. This was 2023. We got a special invite from Bonterra to come and participate in a rock workshop over in Hopland at their winery. So Dan and I tootle over there, and we sit and we listen to everything, and they talk about the three pillars, and the first two pillars, the soil health was, oh, I think we can handle that. Yeah, that looks great. Shouldn't be a problem. The second pillar in regards to animal welfare, well, I've got a sheep herder. We contract our sheep herder out, and he's on the up. He's good, but the third pillar is the one that we looked at each other like, whoa, that's a little invasive. There's some vulnerability there. I don't know that would fly with us. Well, we took that back to ownership, and ownership batted it around for a couple of weeks, and we decided, let's make a run at it. Right? So you expose yourself a little bit with that third pillar, right? Let's be honest, right? You got to bring in HR, you got to bring in your employees, and there's introductions, there's interviews, and what have you. So that in of itself, we hurdled over that, no problem. And today we continue to receive phone calls, not from the big players, but from small wineries looking to source fruit that are regenerative certified. That's our motivation, guys. Everybody understands this is a market, right? And in my 30 years, I've never seen the market as dismal as it is today. And if Vino Farms is going to, sustain themselves for the next 50 years, we had to adapt. So that's our motivation to continue forward with that. And it sounds shallow in a sense, right? But at the end of the day, we are a business, right? And out of this transition into regenerative, we are learning some things about ourselves as a company, which, we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
That's awesome. To really, yeah, thank you for the thoroughness of that answer. I think that, like you said, regenerative agriculture and regenerative viticulture cannot and will not scale to the level that we need it to really revitalize our food system and, our wine grape system without that market mechanism, without that, we need to see that price signal to really, because there's only so many vineyards that can afford to do regenerative just out of the sense of like, it's the thing that they want to do, or like I was saying, sort of from a place of a moral standing. And I think that seeing that there is that that price difference, or that there's that product differentiation, that there is that market mechanism to allow you guys to not only explore regenerative, but now sort of, get excited about it and continue to scale.
Yeah.
That's awesome to hear.
Absolutely. We were hoping that sustainability would provide us with that mechanism, and it didn't.
Yeah.
Right. We were hoping being certified sustainable would provide a little bump in price. I'll be honest. I don't know that I have seen a price increase in the last 15, 16 years from the big players in the Lodi region. So we're in a pocket that's very unique. We can grow tonnage to a certain degree, but we're not going to pump out 15, 20 ton to the acre in Lodi. We can't do it. It's not feasible, right? So, at the price structure, the price point that we are at, we have to find a niche market, to continue, right?
That's awesome. So, to clarify, in case anyone doesn't know, Mike was referring to the three pillars of the ROC or the ROA certification: soil health, animal welfare, and then that third pillar is, I think they call it either social equity, or it's basically, how you treat your workers. And there's some really very high bars in terms of what you are required to pay your workers, a living wage. So it really is, I think, a strong stand that they've made, but it's a really important one, right? Like these. I think what is so beautiful about regenerative agriculture is we're viewing the agricultural system very holistically. It's the entire system. And so we're including the welfare and the well-being of our workers in, we cannot be a regenerative farm without regenerating those relationships with our workers. So I would love to hear a little bit more about how that's gone over. How has your workforce responded? How's it been on the business side? Has it, been squeezing your margins, or how has it been transitioning with the ROC sort of standards and requirements around your workforce?
Sure. It's very unique. We created a position about a year ago internally. with Vino Farms. And this position is a position that I assumed. I raised my hand the highest. Actually, I was the only one that raised my hand when this position was flown in the company. And basically, what it is we saw a need for somebody on the Vino Farm side to be a presence with the farm labor contractor crews that help us out in our vineyards. Okay, so basically what I do in my spare time is I travel the state to all of our growing regions with Vino Farms, and I speak with all of our FLC crews and ownership and just create this collaboration, right? Letting them know that we are here for them, that we are, we appreciate your support. We're here to support you guys. This has evolved. It will be evolving into internal employees for Vino Farms as well. So we see the importance of the employee on our side. We see the value in that, and we're looking at giving it back in regards to having somebody out there available to listen, to talk, right? To keep their finger on the pulse on how are the people doing that are actually out there doing the leaf pulling, the suckering, the training, right? There's been a disconnect for a long time, well, probably forever, between, the farm management companies and the farm labor contractor employees. And what we're doing now is we're trying to bring that circle of communication closed with everybody. And this is going to evolve into a role where I get to go around and speak with all of the Vino Farms employees as well. So, I'm a little bit of a therapist. I'm a little bit of a psychologist. I'm a big time life coach leader in that respect as well.
That's really cool, Mike. It's cool to hear how you're changing the paradigm there and investing as an organization. And y'all are probably some of the first people to do that and really try and bite that off at scale. So pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we saw the importance of the soil side, but the employee side, the employee welfare is something that I think that we hold dear to ourselves as well, right? And that's a unique approach, the way I see it.
Yeah. So looping back to that, obviously that's, creates costs and complexity and difficulty in the business, I'm sure, all that change. But going back to sort of that market piece and the market mechanism, do you all feel like there's promise in this niche? Are you seeing a premium? Or is that carrying through and helping sort of pay for all these changes? Could you touch on that a little bit?
Sure. Oh, without a doubt. There's a premium being paid, and we are very upfront with anybody who we talk to about our product. We're there's certain aspects, there's certain activities in the field now that are a little bit more expensive than they are on the conventional side. So, we need to be augmented for that, right? You're talking about wineries that are at the price point of, anywhere from $30 to $50 a bottle. So, they're typically paying us, the smaller wineries are doubling what we would normally get from the big players. That allows us to come in on the labor side and do site specific tasks that these guys are asking for us to do. Whereas today, I can't really do that for the big players. It just, with the cost of wages, the cost of labor and everything, it's just not feasible, right? At the end of the day, like I said, we're a business. We have to stay, solvent. But definitely this move into the regenerative side, the organic side, has given us that opportunity to get back in the fields and do these cultural practices that increase the quality, right?
Absolutely.
I'm on mute. I wanted to ask a little bit about exactly that. What kind of quality differences are you seeing? I know we were talking yesterday, and obviously, having that price premium allows you to kind of be extra careful with those blocks and really, pull out all the stops if necessary.
Yeah.
Have you seen clear differences in the quality from the regenerative blocks? How would you describe that? And then what have you been hearing from the winemakers?
Well, I think Charlie and Jay in the group, since we're only into this, a little over a year, it's kind of hard to quantify, the quality standards from a phenolic standpoint. I think at this point, feedback from the winemakers has been outstanding. Lodi tends to struggle with acidity just because of the heat. And I'm hopeful that these practices will help mitigate some of that. We're going to increase our water moisture, holding capacity. We're going to move away from all this synthetics. But I think the way I look at it, Charlie and Jay, is this is more than a trial. This regenerative move, it's a study. It's a lifelong study for us. So time will tell. And I'm hopeful that it will. But we haven't seen any quantitative quality aspects at this point yet, because we're relatively new to it. I think it's going to take some time for that to rear its head.
Yeah, it does, right? We know that it takes time to kind of rehab, like you said, these soils that are pretty sterile. It takes a while to build that soil microbiome. But then once we do, we've seen with our other vineyards that we work with, a lot of we're lucky to work with a lot of ROC vineyards. So we've got Bonterra, and I was just lucky enough the other day. I was at Donham, and we did a really interesting tasting where they had one block. Hopefully Tony doesn't kill me for talking about this. We've got one block, and they've got basically no till, a minimal till, and then full tillage. Or maybe it's every other row till is the most tilled. Same varietal, same irrigation, everything. We got to taste the wines from those 3 parts of the block. And I was the press, and there's some, master sommeliers, people who really have quite sophisticated palates. And it was so amazing, the difference between the 3. Like, everyone agreed that there was so much more life and kind of layers of flavor and complexity in the wine where there was no till. And then what's great is we can pull up the agrology data. We can show, oh, there's way more life. There's way more microbial activity in that block. So it just makes sense, right? Like, I think intuitively for me, it makes sense that in order to create wines with a lot of life and a lot of complexity, we need a lot of life and complexity in the soils, and we need soils that are highly functional. And then, of course, there's all the academic research that backs that up, that shows that when you have soils with more microbial life, you get a higher production of secondary plant metabolites, phenolics, tannins, which on the other side help the vine be resilient and resistant to stress when there's these crazy heat waves, right? So there's all these like compounding kind of stacking benefits to regenerative, but as you said, it takes time.
It's going to take time. Yeah.
So outside of sort of the quality piece, outside of the the premium that you're seeing from the regenerative grapes, are you guys exploring other things on the regenerative side? And maybe Daniel, I'd love to throw this one to you because we haven't heard anything from you yet.
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, I know that you've mentioned, hedgerows. I know that maybe there's some exploration of carbon credits. So I'd love to just hear about kind of what are the operational benefits or operational value that you're seeing or you think that you'll see.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think one of the benefits is the carbon credits. With everything we've been doing, we pretty much fulfill almost every requirement for it. Then the real question becomes, who do we sell the carbon credits to, which is what we've been working on. We're currently hoping to do a process where we sell the credits internally in the US, but if that doesn't work, we're hoping to then look at overseas opportunities to sell them. But yeah, then our other project we're working on is we're starting a compost tea project where we're going to take vermicompost and brew it, and we'll brew it in totes the size of 250 gallons. We're hoping to have 2 going at the same time, which means basically we can start hitting up to like 500, 600 acres with compost tea at once. And we're pretty much finding that it's going to be affordable enough that we're going to be able to hit our ranches over and over with the compost tea. And then we'll use our agrology sensors to see if we can pick up any boosting carbon restoration when we do that.
Awesome.
And then our other big project is we have hedgerows planting, where instead of just doing hedgerows in a perimeter around our vineyards, we're doing hedgerows that are actually where we've had rows of vines removed. And so we're replacing those rows of vines with native plants to kind of get like native plants deep inside the vineyard as opposed to just on the perimeters.
Awesome. Were those vines that you were already going to pull out, or were they getting pulled out for the sole reason of adding in vineyard?
Yeah, they actually got pulled out because when we were initially transitioning, we were going to create a barrier between what we thought were going to be conventional vineyards and then biodynamic vineyards. And the way everything turned out for us, we ended up just converting the entire vineyard property over to being organic and regenerative. And so with those vines gone, we figured instead of replanting it, we'll just continue on with the hedgerow product and still try to get the benefits of those natives.
Awesome. Can you give us a quick breakdown? I know you mentioned some specific practices, but what does your regenerative program look like? So in your ROC block, what are you doing and how is that different from your conventional blocks?
Yeah, so an ROC block, we're applying 5 tons an acre of compost every other year. And then that compost is blended with SOP, and that's really probably 80% of our nutritional requirements right there. Um, and then going into spring, we have a ranch, we get bad leaf hoppers. And when you're organic and regenerative, you can't just use a neonic to get rid of leaf hoppers like a regular vineyard would. And so what we do is we bring a drone through Parabug, and we drop a combination of green lace wings, and then we also throw in anagyrus into the mix to help us with our vine mealybugs too. And then we have a spray program that's sulfur-based, combined with Problad Verde as our primary fungicide. And then we are still pursuing our biodynamic side of things, so we will then, do our BD 501 and 500 throughout the season. And then, continuing on that, once you get through like a summer edition of like some type of organic fertilizer, the shoot thinning, leaf thinning, estimates, all that's just the same as conventional, and then we're picking.
Got it. Grazing, are you integrating sheep in as well?
Yeah. So in the fall, going all the way to early spring, we'll have a grazer run up and down covering the entire vineyards.
Multiple passes, or are you just doing a single pass?
Multiple passes often. When you're organic and you have, your growth of weeds going throughout the entire year, it's really the best way to take a vineyard and actually clean it up from top to bottom is sheep.
Yeah.
Something like, when you're conventional, you can just use herbicides and clear out a row easy. But when you're organic, you got your finger roller, you got your weed knife. And then if, beyond that, you can either have a crew do it and cost you a ton of money, or sheep can just come in and take care of everything.
Totally. Not to mention, spreading their microbial inoculant all around.
Yeah.
Fertilizing.
Cycling, nutrients like crazy.
Yeah. Plus, it's beautiful and it's fun to be in.
Well,
that's always
and on my side, what we're going to do this year as well is we're going to incorporate the sheep in as a leaf pulling pass, leaf removal pass.
Really? Can you tell us more about that? That's, I think,
well, and I was made aware of this this last winter that my sheep herder had taken his sheep over to another client of his in a block that was in the beginning wasn't sold. So he didn't want to spend any money on mowing. So he brought the sheep in there. And what they noticed is the sheep ate the leaves around the clusters, but did not eat the clusters. So I'm going to give it a shot and see what that looks like. And maybe there's somebody out there that's listening that's tried this already that can say, no, don't do that. Yes, they will go after the fruit. But this guy's telling me that they left all the fruit alone.
I love that experimentation. Yeah, excited to see the results there. Pam has a good, just related question. What kind of sheep do you know the varietal, the sheep breed?
Oh boy.
Put you on the
top. Put me on the spot. I can find out. Yeah, I can reach out to, cool. I can find out from my herder. Yeah.
Awesome. I think this is probably a good moment. Do we want to jump in and look at some of the agrology data, just because we have been monitoring the regenerative versus the conventional, and we could kind of talk through that briefly if that works for everyone?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, you can see this?
Yep.
Cool. So this is looking at, so agrology, we monitor soil respiration. That is an indicator of microbial activity. And this is looking at two different vineyards. They're pretty close to each other, right? Simmerhorn and Grand Vinlands?
Yeah, about like 10, 15 minutes away.
Okay, so yeah, pretty close. Obviously, every vineyard has its own unique soil and is all a little different. But as you can see here, the blue line, which is the regenerative Grand Vinland, is just way outperforming the Simmerhorn conventional control, which is the red line. And this is looking, you know, in the spring from February 15th to about April 8th. This is quite normal. We see oftentimes where the soil microbiome really kicks into gear in spring as soil temperatures raise, but there's still good soil moisture. And so this is also an interesting thing to think about in terms of timing of inoculations, of biology, of use of compost tea or fertilizations, is trying to kind of ride up that wave of microbial activity and then really amplify it so that it carries out through the season. This is looking at microbial biomass carbon in those two same blocks. So the green line here is the conventional control, blue line is the regenerative. Also, I should say that this regenerative block is going to be certified ROC, I believe, in like July. So it's not ROC, but it's following all the practices in that program. Any organic conversion or regenerative organic conversion takes time. Yeah, any comments or ideas here? Daniel, Mike, Jay.
I think it's important to note for these range comparisons, the regenerative one is actually on a very sandy alluvial soil where it's much harder to build up organic matter. So to see it this much higher with this much more carbon respiration is pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's pretty high level control too, right, Daniel? Like it's not just like your control, you're throwing a lot of compost in that control vineyard as well.
Yeah. So that vineyard just got a grant for the next few years. So it actually received 8 tons an acre of compost this winter. It runs cover crops. It's basically no-till as well. Really the only place it's, doing things that would be considered not regenerative is its use of herbicides and conventional fungicides.
Which is pretty amazing. I mean, I just want to like kind of pause on that for a moment, right? So the green line here, the conventional, is receiving more compost. It is also receiving cover crops. But yet that difference of not using synthetic fertilizers and not using herbicides is creating a massive difference in the microbial biomass carbon, in the microbial activity, and also in the carbon accumulation. So I believe the next slide was actually sharing some of the results from this soil health report. Do you want to talk through this project at all, Daniel?
Yeah, this was of the results of a bunch of our soil tests. This kind of shows this is basically our list of regenerative blocks, with Nance kind of and Simmerhorn being controls. But what's funny is due to market conditions, we're actually basically converting Nance starting this year, so it's going to be certified regenerative in 3 years. But yeah, going through it. So this is I believe this was the study we did with Tommy Fenster, if I remember correctly. But yeah, this kind of shows side by side everything we're doing. Our ranch 7 is called Cherry Road. Right there is the very first place we started at, actually, where you see the highest percent of soil organic carbon. Yeah, and then going down, you can see Vista Luna, which is a organic ranch that we took over farming a few years ago. That's been certified organic for pretty much almost its entire life. Kind of shows you what that can do there. Jack Tone is a ranch we started farming organically last year. That's in the transitional process. And then Grand Vinlands is the other place we started. And you see those really low soil organic carbon numbers there. And that's because the soil there is very, very sandy. It is a challenge to get that soil to hold water. It is a challenge to get it to build up organic matter. We've been applying compost and organic amendments there for years, and it's actually up from where it used to be. It's very difficult to work with, soil like that and keep it holding that organic matter, because it wants to dry out and it will dry out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Important, right? We need to call out context. Y'all are in a difficult context in Lodi and sandy soils that you're going to get stuck. It's going to take some time maybe to see those changes in quality, changes in the sort of operational benefits as well. So I think it's good to sort of take everything as it comes here.
Yeah, I do love though. I mean, there's clearly some patterns here, right? Like Vista Luna that's been farmed organically for the longest. Just, obviously maybe the soils were already kind of higher in
Mhm.
CEC, higher in soil organic matter, just kind of because of its natural geochemical history.
Yeah.
But just super high levels of carbon both in the vine and in the alley. And then one thing that I always think is interesting is we're seeing just higher levels of SOC in the alley compared to the vine row kind of throughout, with some really big differences once we look at Grand Vin and Simmerhorn, where we have those sandier soils, almost double the amount of SOC in the alley. Any thoughts as to why that is?
Yeah, so I would say that's probably due to for one, Grand Villains has been having cover crops since 1999. So that's generally a buildup from that. Because before we were farming it organically, we were farming it conventionally. So we had uh basically like under the vines, it was kept clean with herbicides for 20 plus years. Um uh and then but we had those cover crops rolling the entire time, so you have that year over year of organic matter buildup, which shows like this all can work and this can lead to big improvements. It's just going to take time. And yeah, so that would be my guess, the difference between the alleys and under the vine at Grand Vinlands.
Yeah,
And same with Simmerhorn, and same with pretty much most of them.
you see this pretty much in Chuck Schember from Understanding Ag talks about this a lot. You see this in pretty much any orchard that has been managed conventionally, like the under vine or under tree. Tends to be a little bit more sterile, and that's
Yeah.
because you're hammering on it, right? Whereas the alleys, by ignoring them, sometimes they're in a
Yeah.
better state when you're looking at biology.
Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
amazing what cover crops can do. We've done soil pits on old vineyards, and you can very clearly see the dark area where the cover crops used to be, and then the not dark area where the vines used to be.
Mhm.
I've
Yeah.
seen it a bunch, so
Yeah, we talk about that and we see that a lot, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways to boost biology. And like adding compost, adding biochar, these things are great. Like, but compost, for example, it gets burned off pretty quickly, right? I think the stat is like roughly half of it gets burned off in the first year, and then it's like a
yeah.
little bit less and a little bit less. It lasts like 5 years. But we know that the liquid carbon pathway, which is essentially getting carbon or energy into the soil through plants, through basically it's absorbed out of the atmosphere, and then it is released into the soil as root exudates. That is the best way to get carbon into the soil, and that's the best way to build your biology. That's the best way to build soil organic matter that really stays for a long time. And so, like you said, the I think we can't really overstate the importance of cover crops and just having living plants on as much of our soil as long as possible. It's like really that simple. Like get as much of the soil green for as long as possible. And that's the best way to build that soil function.
Mhm.
All right. So kind of jumping into some more questions here. Jay, you want to jump onto a question?
Yeah, I think we talked about, a lot of this stuff in the preamble. I know y'all are early into it, so we won't ask you too much about like operational benefits and changes you're seeing in the vines yet or in the actual vineyards. But like typically we hear two motivations, right, for going down this road. It's quality, and then it's buffering, some climate buffering, dealing with that heat, dealing with that water holding. And I know you're just a few years into a lot of these management changes, so you're not seeing that yet. But what do you all see, Daniel, Mike, as the sort of operational promise here? We do know that regenerative is more fun, so maybe you're already having more fun with it. But what do you sort of anticipate over the next few years in terms of operational benefits and labor savings? And do you think that you're going to start to see that if you can move these SOM numbers up? And
Yeah. I hope I can see an improvement in water holding capacity in a lot of our soils. That's kind of for me would be the most like directly beneficial one. Um, it would be nice to see, man, like some type of biochar that would be like a little bit more cost effective that we can really go in at higher rates at. Um, yeah, I think overall though, I think with us establishing more hedgerows, getting more habitat up and running, I think things will just get easier and easier for us to keep farming this way. And there's a very good chance we expand our regenerative acres to being like 1,500.
That's awesome. That's super exciting. I'm sure that, that's exciting for you guys as a business. It's exciting for the buyers. I'm sure ROA is excited to hear that.
Yeah.
Uh, I wanted to jump in because we're moving along in our time here. We've got 15 minutes left. Just for the record for everyone, we probably will go over a little bit, but if you have to jump, no worries. But I wanted to talk about this Biologic trial that Agrology supported you in. So either Mike or Daniel, can you give us just a high-level overview of what motivated experimenting with these different biologic products, and what were you hoping to find? And then we can look at some of the data and we can actually talk about the results.
Sure, I'll get it started and then Dan
Yeah.
can finish it up. 2 years ago, our chemical and fertilizer provider came to us and asked us very directly, what else can we do to assist you guys with, right? And almost immediately, Dan and I were, well, we're moving in this direction of organic, and there's limited products to us. I've been hitting bombarded with emails from biostimulant companies, biofertilizer companies. I knew nothing about any of this theater, nothing. So we threw it out to Grow West, our fertilizer company. Why don't you guys research and come up with, whatever you guys think is doable in terms of different biological products, and let's run a trial on a conventional block initially, right? And I think what we were really trying to do is get a baseline, you guys, in terms of, what's the soil microbiome look like, and can we improve it from there? And that's when we integrated you guys into that study as well, knowing that, if we started this trial in an organic or a regenerative block, that we're probably already going to have an elevated number in terms of soil microlife. But we really wanted a good idea, because the majority of the acres that we farm statewide is conventionally practiced, right? So we wanted to see what that looked like. And basically it's evolved from there, to where we are going to continue with this research project. We did it for 2 years. We gathered some interesting data, which Dan can talk about. And now we're going to evolve it into a 10-year study, basically, where we just look at a couple of products and look at them over time and see how they affect, respiration, the vines themselves, the organic matter. So, it basically, that's how it started.
Awesome. And then have you guys gotten any grants, or is this all just being funded by Vino, or, what organizations are supporting this work?
This is all just private, just Vino Farms and Grow West doing this. We have grants, but this other projects. This trial is all just private.
Awesome. Good on you.
Yeah.
Daniel, do you want to talk about kind of how you guys were going to measure the results before Agrology jumped on, or like other ways that you're looking at the results?
Yeah, so our initial plan before Agrology was basically we were going to trial this and essentially kind of do yield, where we gather the grapes at the end of the year, get the total yield for each row with each treatment, and get all our yields for each one. Go through and kind of do like subjective passes with a lot of different PCAs and vineyard managers of seeing, what looks better growth wise, and also measuring canopy. And then we did counts for shatter and berry set. And then we were going to take separate petioles too for each set.
Oh, I'm muted. Sorry about that. Got it. Did you, well, we can talk about the results maybe side by side with some of the Agrology results. Does that sound good? Should I pull up the slide?
Yeah.
All right. So This is all at Simmerhorn Ranch, correct?
Yeah.
And we are looking at 3 different products plus a control. This is looking at microbial biomass carbon from about July 15th through the beginning of October, so really through the height of the summer. In general, this is when we see, microbial activity die down. This is when, most of the carbon accumulation ends up happening in fall and especially in spring. So, but we did see some clear differences here, right? So we're seeing NutriDrive with the blue line that's kind of clearly the highest throughout. There's some moments where it crosses over. We saw the control and the root RX moving pretty much in tandem. So, the root RX, we saw definitely some improved microbial biomass carbon, but just, moving pretty closely. And then the Nutrimix was the lowest microbial biomass carbon. Again, we do our best to set up these trials in a way that it's like comparing apples to apples, but every vineyard has spatial heterogeneity, so there's no way to actually guarantee that this is like exactly apples to apples, but there are some clear trends that emerged here.
Yeah.
All right, and now I'll move to the next slide. Jay, you want to talk through the soil respiration?
Yeah, sure thing. So I think respiration sort of translates directly to that microbial biomass carbon. And it's a general measure of activity, right? So I think this shows pretty clearly the sort of spring results from the trial and how those treatments were affecting the overall microbial activity in the soils. And again, I think we see that Nutrimix sort of trending down the bottom. The rest of them are, closely aligned. But those top performers sort of stand out, right? In both microbial biomass carbon and springtime respiration. It really is interesting. The biggest driver when we do these trials is always climate. So it's temperature and moisture. And you kind of see where all those lines dip right in early May. That was just a cool spring day in May. So that was I think, what was it, like a high of 50 that day? Is that right,
Yeah.
Charlie?
Yeah.
So, and that's really the beauty of the agrology system oftentimes is, being able to see the real time, right? If you took a soil test on that day and did a burst test, a Haney test, you might have skewed results. But looking at it over, the course of the time and seeing how it ebbs and flows with the changing seasons, we get a better sense for overall performance of inoculations.
So this is looking at summer and harvest. So again, if you actually look at the vertical axis here, it's actually a lot lower than the spring. In the spring, we're up in the 4 and 5 grams per meter squared, whereas here we're down in the 2 to 4 zone. But yeah, again, as Jay said, we've got some clearly kind of the highest performers here. In this zone, they all kind of merge together, right? Which is something we touch on a lot. We see the biggest differences in both the impact of practices, the impact of biologic products in spring and fall. And we often see the, soil microbiome goes more dormant in the summer. It's not completely dormant, but oftentimes we see everything kind of merge and be, and they're doing exactly that here. NutriDrive is still one of the top performers. The control is actually doing quite well as well. And then this is the cost per acre breakdown. So this is also a very critical piece of information, right? Like we don't want to just be making decisions based on performance necessarily, because there's also like, what's the ratio of performance to cost, i.e. what's the actual value of this product? So Mike or Daniel, I mean, it's pretty clear here what's going on, right? But NutriDrive was one of the top performers and much lower cost than these other products. So yeah, I'll hand it back to you guys to turn, to share a bit about like, what was your thought process? What are you going to do with these results? Are you going to scale, the use of this product?
Yes. One of the big things we noticed from all the products actually was in 2023, our vineyard had quite a bit of shatter, and actually every single one of the products actually had a pretty big reduction in shatter, which I thought was pretty impressive seeing that. Kind of shows you just in general, if you're boosting your microbiology, it'll find a way to help you. But yeah, so after seeing the NutriDrive as the big performer, we essentially were just, well, I guess we found our product more or less. So we ended up applying the NutriDrive last year to about 750 acres to all of our organic branches at the time. Now that number is closer to like 830, which we will most likely, we still have the trial going on, but we're most likely going to use the NutriDrive again this year.
Awesome. Well, it's a really good example of exactly what we want to see in any sort of regenerative process, or really, I mean, on the conventional side, right? Like experimenting, gathering the data, and then making a data-driven decision in terms of what you're going to scale. Because otherwise, we're just shooting on kind of, intuition and also, just our best guess. But when we're able to gather data around the impact of the products, and then we can also correlate that with things like shatter, with yield, with the cost per acre, it can oftentimes be very, very clear what should be scaled. And I think you guys have a great example of exactly that.
Yeah, without the arbors in place, this decision would have been purely made on a subjective, value, right? But having the arbors in place, it reiterated what we were seeing in the field, and that was a good feeling, right?
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it really helps because we really didn't see much of a difference in yield or on the petioles. So the soil respiration was kind of our truly like one last objective way to look at it. That and the price, of course.
Yeah, awesome. And that makes sense, right? Because oftentimes microbial activity is going to be the precursor to those things. Like we'll see changes in microbial activity before we see differences in yield or differences in quality or differences in the amount of shatter. All those things are lagging indicators. And again, I think that's one of the things that's really helpful about looking at and really seeing what's happening underneath the soil is you're looking upstream as opposed to just trying to guess based on lagging indicators. All right, I think that is all the data we have on the biologic trial. Yep, so I'm going to stop sharing and then Jay, I'll pass it back to you for a couple more questions.
Yeah, I think, I'm really excited and I want to just sort of loop back to this. You mentioned it earlier, Daniel, starting to experiment with compost tea. And obviously, you can do that in a really cost-effective way and put out a lot of biology
Yeah.
across the ridge. And I think more and more as we work with growers through these trials, they're starting to think about timing too, right? So rather than running an inoculation product out consistently throughout the summer, when you're seeing that biology sort of start to taper and go dormant, maybe just not
Yeah.
continuing at it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of what we've seen too is that spring going to like mid-June is really the prime season for microbial activity. So for us, like our big priority is trying to time it along with the bloom root flush and grapevines. So if we can kind of combine those two things for us, I feel like we've really hit our sweet spot for it. But then our backup for this year, it'll be our first time doing compost tea, is we'll just kind of keep applying it over and over again because once we have it set up, actually buying vermicompost isn't that bad. So
Yeah, it's not going to hurt, right?
yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. And I think we hear that, right? Trying to time it with root flush. We also think about, recovery in the fall, and some of the growers we're working with are thinking
yeah,
about it as well. But just like building biology in those in that fertility building root flush zone, as well as that recovery period when you're kind of trying to recharge the soil profile. Those are both opportunities. And I think that's one one area, not only are growers using our data to start to think about an early indicator of like carbon cycling and soil health cycling, but just seeing when soils are the most active and alive. And you're with this regenerative management system, you're just trying to sort of nudge along natural processes. You're not trying to, intervene. So when you can see when things are spiking, you can probably have more opportunity to build microbial populations during those and activity during the.
yeah,
We're trying to facilitate. That's the word we look for. We're
yeah.
facilitating it, right? Absolutely.
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. Well, we are at the top of the hour here. We're gonna keep going for a few minutes, but I just want to acknowledge if anyone has to jump, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you. We'll send out a follow-up email with slides as well as the recording. But yeah, at this point, we'll jump into some of the questions in the chat. So if you have questions, feel free to throw them into the chat, and we will start with some. We'll just kind of work our way from the top down. Well, actually, maybe we'll just jump around. Jay, you got anyone you want to start with?
First of all, there was a number of folks who chimed in on that grazing leaf pulling sort of comment, Mike, and sort of echoed that idea that sheep will probably leave the berries alone.
Yeah.
Mentioned that one of our other customers who has a lot of experience with grazing in vineyards in New Zealand and a few other baby doll sheep. Someone commented, "Baby doll, don't touch the berries." Maybe it's all sheep, maybe it's not. So we'll be excited to sort of hear that. But yeah, a lot of sentiment that.
Yeah, it's a win-win situation. Mike, typically that time of the year, the sheep herders are looking for places to put their sheep, right? We're looking to trim canopies a little bit, right? And at the same time, looking to maybe open up the canopies a little bit by leaf removal. So we'll definitely be trying it on a normal, what I would refer to as a normal cordon height, somewhere around 40, 42 inches. But definitely in Lodi, we have a lot of high wire mechanical prune. And I don't expect, my Dorper sheep to get up there, 5 feet up in the air to do that. But I do like the idea of Dorpers being able to do some hedging for me at the same time. So, I'm eliminating cost. I'm providing a home for the sheep. They're benefiting from it. I'm benefiting from it. I'm hoping that it's going to be a win-win situation for us.
That's awesome. Yeah, Kane Thompson, who's another one of our clients, we can put you in contact with him.
Yeah.
He says in New Zealand, they don't eat or his experience from New Zealand is they don't eat the fruit because it's too acidic, but he says they do need to be pulled out before creation. So
yeah.
Tips for you there.
I think for us, the challenge is going to be how do I get my sulfur dusts and my sprays on when I have sheep in the vineyard, right? So that logistically moving things around to where I can be in there in between my intervals, that's going to be the challenge for me, right?
We have a question. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
Pam asked, is anyone trialing high wire trellis for year-round grazing? I think there are a few smaller vineyards.
There are. Lane Twins in Lodi is the big one for that.
Okay. Yeah. And then I know Patinas Ranch is also doing that.
It's called Pam is called they're Lane Twins Winery. They have a regenerative block that's high wire that they have grazers year round.
In Piscinus as well, in a different area, is doing that. I'm sure there's more that are doing it too, but those are just two that come to mind.
Yeah.
Pam also has a question, a good one, and so I'll let her needle you on this one about price. So what were the increased farming costs on the regenerative block? Did you see like improvements in yield, i.e. did the ROC block result in higher profitability, or was it kind of a wash because you have, you're getting a premium on the grapes, but you're spending more to grow them?
No, so let's talk pricing. So, generally speaking, in these blocks, we're anywhere from $550 to $600, $700 tops a ton. Okay, that's the Lodi price market.
That's conventional.
That's conventional. That's the reality exactly in Lodi, right? And it's been that way for 15 years. As far as I can remember, we have not seen a price increase in Lodi in that long. We have smaller wineries. We have larger wineries that are sourcing fruit out of the organic and regenerative blocks. The larger wineries are a little bit softer on their pricing models. They're probably around 900 to 1,000 a ton. Whereas the smaller guys, the guys that are around the 2,000 case level, I mean, we're fetching anywhere from $1,500, $1,800 a ton.
Wow.
And in regards to costs, I would say, overall, yeah, it's more expensive on the cost. Your IPM line items, your weed management, your weed abatement line items are a little bit higher. But but significantly, I wouldn't pin significantly on that. I'd say probably 20%, 20% more
Okay.
at most. Yeah,
Yeah, we're far more profitable in our organic and regenerative than our
absolutely.
That's
it's
amazing. Those are great
yeah,
stats. So like 20% increase in cost, but we're looking
Yeah.
at, potentially double to 3 times the premium or
Yeah.
the price per ton. How about the difference between regenerative organic and just organic? Any difference there?
well, we farm our regenerative organic and organic the exact same way. So there isn't really a difference.
Yes. Makes it easy.
Yeah. It's essentially just all the BD, the regenerative, the organic, it's all farmed the same way because we have so many certifications. We have a ranch that's certified regenerative organic. It's a greener world regenerative certified, it's CCOF certified, Lodi rules, bee friendly, and Demeter biodynamic. And
And
so to try
Xerxes.
to
And
like,
Xerxes, Dan. Throw in
yeah, so
Xerxes.
it's bee friendly, yeah.
Right.
So to try to farm differently to that extent is not possible. So we just farm in a regenerative way that essentially covers every single certification.
Got it. Awesome. And so what motivated you to get these different certifications? Because like, for example, you have more organic acreage than you have regenerative organic certified, right?
Yeah, and that will probably change this year. To be honest, though, we're in the process of anything that's already CCUF, uh, just certifying that regenerative as well and going on top of it. Um, yeah, and basically we went with organic initially because we were still figuring out what regenerative certification was going to bring the most value to
Yeah.
us. Which we think regenerative organic by ROA is the way to go. But yeah, it's when it comes to certification regenerative, it's a very quickly changing world, so we'll see.
Yeah, it is. How has it been working with ROA? Has that process been pretty smooth? Have they been supportive? What kind of support have they given you guys as you've,
Yeah.
gotten certified?
Well, so in California, if you're CCUF certified, CCUF actually just handles your ROC certification. So it's this same exact people as working being organic certified, and CCUF pretty straightforward about the process and how it works. It's essentially you do this, this, and this. They're going to come and they're going to audit on you. They tell you ahead of time you need to have these documents ready for us, and then they're going to kind of test you on it, and then they'll do a surprise audit every now and then. Yeah, we got one of those last year. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward, pretty easy. The hardest part about being ROC certified is when you do your social equity audit. That's a multi-day audit, and so this year, for example, in mid-May, we have an auditor that's going to be in our office for 3 days in a row, 9 to 5. Where basically she's also our CTUF organic auditor. So we're piling our ROC and our CCF on top of each other on the same audit. So it'll be 3 consecutive days of audits and documents, which will be quite the mountain climb, I guess you could say.
Yeah, sounds like a marathon of paper.
Yeah,
Yeah, it will be.
yeah. Let's talk about
After the HR department's always mad after every time we do an ROC audit.
Daniel. We'll probably have more fun with this question than the paperwork question, but what kind of compost are you all putting out? I think this is something we hear quite a bit. Compost is such a variable product depending on what you're putting out. And is that going to be the same thing that you're running through your compost tea extractor, or how do you think about compost in your management overall?
Yeah, so for us, it's tough for us because there's a lot of compost I like to get, but realistically, it's we're applying compost like about 400 acres worth, 5 tons an acre. So I'm buying a lot of compost. So I need someone that can handle that volume. Which basically there's 2 different places we get it from. It's California Soils Inc. and then Lopez Ag. The problem is I can make them both run out because we buy so much. California Soils Inc. probably is the better compost. It's called the West Valley compost. It's made they get green materials, I believe, from landscapers in Lodi and Stockton, and then dairy manure. And then Lopez Ag, I think it's dairy manure. And I think his green bins he gets it from green waste from the city and then screens it, is what I believe. So he gets all the garbage out. But yeah, it would be nice to make our own, but we just don't have the raw materials to do it. When you're a vineyard management company, all your fruit goes away on a truck and you never get the pumice back. So we have no materials to make compost ourselves. So we're stuck buying it, and who we buy it from every year is something I'm looking into.
And are you going to use those same sources for your compost tea? Or are you going to go with vermicompost or?
We actually are trying something different with the compost tea. We figure with this we're going to do vermicompost, which is a whole different set of places and compost we're getting. So yeah, we are looking into a variety of places. The old vermicompost place in Sonoma, from it, I guess they shut down. That
Yeah,
was
they
my
did.
initial plan, was just to get that, but that's kind of thrown a wrench in everything. And so Grow West sourced us from some compost. I believe it's from Woodland or somewhere in the Bay Area. I have another option of getting some compost through a place in Sacramento that I know of. We have an employee that is then making his own worm compost as we speak. So we're trying a variety of things.
Very cool.
Nice.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. You can nerd out on different composts and then how that shows up in an extract. And I think, anything you're running through fertigation, microbially pretty rich. And if you can get good fungal counts, that's really good too. We know that can create some magic in the soil.
Totally. It's in my experience and opinion, it's really worth spending a little bit extra on the sources for that compost, right? Because you need so much less of it too in making compost teas. And if you have really high quality stuff like Jason, higher fungal counts, you can just end up with a product that, it's so funny in agriculture. This happens all the time. People are like, oh, do you cover crop? But like cover cropping is not cover cropping, is not cover cropping, right? Irrigation is not irrigation. In compost teas, there's such a wide variety of the qualities and then the impacts that they can have, which again brings us back to like, it's so important to measure the results and so important to be super observant and, even potentially like break out the microscope and like look at your compost tea in the microscope and start doing some, family counts or send it off to biome makers. There's a lot of ways, but it's really important to really dig into what's actually going on under the soil, what's actually going on in our compost tea extracts, and we're excited to be along for the ride, as part of all that.
Yeah, it's very exciting. It's a lot of new things. It brings a lot of fun back to everything.
Yeah. So Pam has a question around the greener world because I think there's less knowledge around that certification. Says that there's 200 vineyards in the US in the pipeline for certification. So are you working, how's it been working with a greener world? How is that different than the ROC? And how's it been working with them? Do they have like a strong branding?
Yeah, they're pretty good. So we're actually one of the vineyards already certified with them. So we're not one of the new ones in the pipeline. But yeah, they're pretty easy to work with, pretty nice. So they also require you be certified organic first. And then from there, they're a little bit, they also show up to your office. They want to see your HR side of things. They don't call it exactly the 3 pillars, but essentially they're built around the same 3 things. That for us, we're exempt from animal welfare. We showed them our employee handbook and a couple other benefits we have, and that covered our social equity. And then we had to take their auditor out to the vineyards and kind of show how we have a year-round sampling protocol in the same place every year. We showed them our pesticide reports and all that. And yeah, we were clear.
They didn't interview employees, did they, Dan, at Greener World?
Not.
No.
The guy was open to do it, and he talked to a couple other people, but it was not the same level that ROC is, where you need to take me through a labor crew. And like, I just stand there and sit back, and the guy runs into the crew and talks to everyone. The Greener World, he just went and talked to a handful of our tractor drivers, basically. But it is a strong certification. They're benchmarked to be, so you can basically, you're qualified to sell your wine in Whole Foods is really one of the big values of the Greener World.
Awesome.
Interesting question too from Pam on market dynamics. Mike, I think you'll have a good insight on this. It's like, why isn't the whole region in Lodi jumping on this conversion?
Well, they probably will after today, Jay.
Yeah, you guys blew up your spot.
Yeah.
You guys had it in the title, Secrets to Success. Sorry. To be honest, Pam, I think I'm blessed in a way that I have employees like Dan and his group that can take on the tasks of all these audits and the paperwork, right? because it's time consuming. It's very detailed. And also, like I mentioned, on the social pillar, there's some vulnerability that comes with that, right? I mean, if you looked at your county's living wage, recently, you'd be shocked, right? What they consider a living wage. And we took a big deep breath, like, wow, that's impressive. But I think going forward, there's probably going to be some buy into this, but at the end of the day, it's another process that somebody's got to sit down and track all this stuff. And if you have that infrastructure already in place, it makes sense to do. But if you're a grower that you do not keep good records, right? That you're not taking care of your people, and there's growers out there like that. I hate to say it, they're not going to fit into this program.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and part of it, to make this all worth it, you need to find a buyer that's willing to pay like that. And those
Yeah.
Sonoma County winemakers that buy this fruit, they're not necessarily going around meeting Lodi growers. So a lot of growers don't have the buyers to make all of this worth it in the long run, which is kind of ultimately a big problem.
Got it. We have another question from Pam. She's coming up with all kinds of good ones. And this one I'm interested in too. So you said that you're farming the ROC blocks and the organic blocks all the same. And it sounds like you're going to be moving to kind of certifying all the blocks that are being farmed in that way as ROA. But right now, since you have some grapes that are just organic and some grapes that are ROC, are you seeing a price difference between those two?
No.
No,
No.
no, they're all the same.
They're all the same. Yep.
Cool. That's
Yeah,
helpful.
it's even a lot of it's even just the same wineries, so
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's
understand
really
price
easy to
one or the
explain,
other.
I bet too. You're like, yeah, this one has the ROC, this doesn't, but it's all farmed the same way. And for them, at
Yeah,
the end of the day. And how
yeah.
about, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, and they've seen our transition over time, so they know exactly what we're doing and the timeline of it all too. So everyone's pretty understanding.
Yeah. Are you seeing this get on wine labels, the either ROC or A Greener World?
Oh,
I haven't.
we have a wine brand that we sell to called the Vivo. I believe they're
Yeah.
marketing it with A Greener World. I think Bonterra includes the ROC on it. I'm not entirely sure.
They definitely do for the grapes they grow. I'm not sure if they have,
Yeah,
I don't know if they do for the grapes that they bring in from their partners like you.
yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, like you said, it's a dynamic space. It's evolving very quickly. It's really exciting. Yeah, in terms of, again, sharing some of the magic with other growers or sort of just like what you guys have learned, what would you suggest for other growers who are interested in exploring regenerative or regenerative organic? What were some of the like hardest lessons you learned as you sort of leaned into this space? Yeah, I guess what advice would you have if someone wanted to like learn more about regenerative viticulture or they wanted to experiment with it?
I think one of the things is when you're farming organic or regenerative, don't just try to find what you do conventionally and just find an organic version of that product and farm exactly the same. You're going to run into a lot of issues. You're going to learn that organic liquid fertilizers aren't, especially when it comes to nitrogen, lack a lot of potency. You can get your potassium pretty easily organically, but it's the others that you're going to run into trouble. And then if you're also doing that, you're going to learn that treating leafhoppers is very difficult. Um, I'd recommend, yeah, just start doing compost, start learning to replace conventional practices with organic ones one at a time. And if you do it right and you do it correctly, you really shouldn't have much of a yield drop.
Yeah, that's so important. I think that the two last things you said are important, right? Like not only there's this big kind of story out there that no matter what, you're going to see a yield drop. I think that is a myth. And the other piece you said that's really important is like, don't try to do it all at once. That's what we hear from a lot of growers who are super experienced.
Yeah.
Move slowly, do just, one block at a time and kind of just try to, slowly transition because there's such a learning curve to it. And like you said, it is not just like an input substitution model. That doesn't work. Regenerative truly is like a different approach and it's much more systemic. And I think in a lot of ways, it's a lot more interesting and a lot more fun, but there's definitely some challenges to it.
Mm-hmm.
Any big challenges that you guys ran into that you didn't see coming?
Just we have a block, it's always cranked out, really high yields, like 12, 14 tons an acre. We converted it. It's still cranking out that type of tonnage and struggling with holding acids there.
Yeah.
That's honestly our hardest spot.
Yeah, totally. Jay, any last questions or thoughts?
No,
Uh,
kudos. I think you're transitioning at scale, which is a really interesting case to talk about and learn from you all. And yeah, I love to see you're experimenting and trying and measuring. Like, I think that's also a hallmark, right? Is, you know, learning into it and monitoring and measuring in a lot of different ways and trying things on a small scale before you expand them. Really excited for this next round of work together this year in this compost tea operation.
yeah.
Yeah. Any last thoughts from you, Daniel or Mike, before we sign off?
Just to answer that one question, we don't get any subsidies. We have an NRCS grant on one of our properties. And then we have a Healthy Soils grant on a different conventional property, and that's it. Our organic stuff is profitable on its own.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. We'll send out a follow-up email with the recording and with the deck. Yeah, thank you guys so much for sharing all of this, right? Like we said, it's really encouraging to see just like the collaborative nature of the regenerative movement, and everyone's kind of leaning in and learning in together. And so really appreciate you guys sharing your learnings. And we will continue to have these webinars. So for everyone who's joining us, keep an eye on your inbox. And as we have we do them about once a month. So keep your eye out and we'll send out an invite for the next one. But I hope everyone has a great day, and